Johnson involved in a case where he let someone go and traumatized that child. The kid was low, was medically born in a year. We should be like that to see that. He seems to have a knack for sticking his foot in. He should be on the competition.
It is what it is.
You should bring two cameras, get the other side too. You got a lot of pace back.
That doesn't really work.
Channel 2 might be interested. Somebody else?
What are you at 89.7 or?
No, I put it on YouTube so people can find it.
We'll get this back if I leave something else.
That'll give me something to do.
Sit down.
What's up? We're all set.
Thank you.
To charge, make sure there's continuity has to be work, because that's for district.
What is it?
She has it. For who? Who?
For, hold on.
You didn't send a letter down to us, did you? Because I didn't get it. Can I have it? Because I didn't see it.
It's there, you just open it, man.
Huh?
Like,
Just open it.
It's in here?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
It's all set.
okay. No, because I said I don't remember
It's
reading.
right here.
Oh, is this it? This is it?
This is it.
Yeah, okay.
And this is the,
What's this about? Oh, my favorite, oh my.
right?
Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah, it's about Omar. I know he was in here the other day. I know that he
Oh,
was
that-
meeting
that
with the
is-
governor.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah, it's in now.
Also, it was back. The constituent, Chris Haynes.
Have a seat. Oh, and then we can, anywhere. Yeah.
Sharon.
Yeah. Sure.
You too, my pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so we're gonna start the hearing, so I'd ask you to turn off your phones. How are you? That's how we shut doors around here. Okay. So the way it works is, I'm going to read the letter from the governor, and I'm going to call on each council to speak. They have the floor, they can ask you one question, or they can stay here for 5 days if they want to ask you questions. I will ask people that are here against, if any. And everybody's all done speaking. We will have a vote next week. Okay? Any questions?
No, Counselor.
Okay. Let me read the letter from the governor into the record. Executive Council, Council Chamber of State House, Washington, Mass. Dear Council, I'm pleased to nominate Neil K. Shearing to the position of Associate Justice of the Housing Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I am closing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles Gable, Governor of the Commonwealth. Do you want to just introduce the people who came with you?
Thank you, Counselor. Here in support of me is Attorney Kevin Scanlon. Attorney Scanlon and I were law clerks together, and we also spent time with teaching at the MCLE. Amit Dutt, who's a community friend and family. Attorney Michael Connolly, who was my supervisor at Mintz Levin and also a mentor to me. My wife, Yoshika Shearing, and Lou Dakoyanis, my partner, and Clerk Dottie Powers from the Westwood Town Hall.
I stand when you mentioned that.
Reminds me of that.
Okay, so I'm going to call first on Dottie Powers, the great clerk of Westwood Town Clerk's Office. No, you can come right over here and either stand or sit in that chair, whatever you wish.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the council on behalf of my colleague and friend, Attorney Neil Shearing, on his nomination as Associate Justice to the Mass Housing Court. Neil is someone with good overall character. He's respectful to all who have had the opportunity to work with him. He's kind, has a calming presence, even in a crisis. He's very confident in handling adversity and just an overall gentleman. He is a class act and makes everyone he speaks with feel important. I can attest to these qualities through my work with Neil on the Westwood Community Chest. This is an organization that is one that assists our residents in Westwood who are experiencing financial difficulties, and we provide them with monetary assistance for basic necessities such as housing, utility, and medical bills. Under Neil's leadership as president and vice president, he created a good working environment with board members and community leaders, including our police chief, fire chief, school superintendent, council on aging director, and youth and family services director. He treated everyone respectfully and listened to all suggestions regarding the best way to assist those less fortunate who are struggling with medical, family, and financial issues. There were many instances when an applicant would call, they needed immediate assistance, and most of the time they would call my office, and I would get in touch with Neil, and a lot of times it was to prevent eviction and loss of heat during cold winter months. This happened on many occasions, and Neil went above and beyond, working feverishly with the board to grant these applicants assistance so they could not be on the street or in a cold home. Many of them are elderly residents who are on a fixed income. Neil was compassionate with them, respectful, and assured privacy to applicants as well as board and community liaisons working with him, which are attributes needed as a justice working with people through the housing court system. Another humanitarian act that stands out during Neil's leadership on the Westwood Community Chest was his perseverance in securing mattress donations for homeless residents who were living in a motel in Westwood, who the state found housing placement for. I was on a transitional committee at that time, and we reached out to the Community Chest where I was a member. Without Neil working hard with the Community Chest and with a mattress store, these people wouldn't have gotten basic furnishings and a move would not have been possible. This was another kind act that Neil was directly responsible for. Neil has also organized and facilitated a wonderful festival, the Diwali Festival in Westwood, which I have had the opportunity to attend. It's a wonderful event that brings the community together with diversity and sharing of his culture with our community. And on a personal note, Neil and his partner, attorney Dakionis, have worked with my father, who owns a business, in collection of delinquent bills, and has worked on the church board with my dad. He's done all of these things in a respectful way, always being considerate of families. With the complexity of housing issues in the Commonwealth, I feel Neil would be a great asset to the housing court in a judicial role with his experience and empathy. And I'm privileged to know him and happy on this next journey for his career.
Thank you very much for that very heartfelt comments about the nominee. Does any councilor have any questions of the clerk from Westwood?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Louis Dakionis, did I pronounce that right?
Like a true Greek. Yes, you did.
It's Greek to me, did you ever hear that?
Many times from my partner. I wanted to thank the council today for providing me the opportunity and privilege to speak about Neil Schering. I have known Neil for approximately 40 years. I first met him in 1978. I was 14 years old, and his family was moving from Quincy to Newton and happened to move right next door to my family, which had recently moved to Newton from Rosendale. At first glance, one wouldn't think that Neil and I have nothing in common, but it's the exact opposite. My family immigrated from Greece to Boston seeking a better life and opportunities. In Greece, my family was very poor. Neil's family immigrated from India to Boston, also seeking a better life and better opportunities. His family was also very poor in India. The Sherings moved into my neighborhood on a weekend. This is the first time I met Neil and his family on Sunday afternoon when my family went to the Sherings' new home to welcome them to the neighborhood with a coffee cake. And then, after meeting with them for a little bit, my father told Neil's father that I would be glad to walk him to school the next day, the next Monday, which I did. Neil and I are the same age, so we were in the same grades throughout junior high school and high school. The street we lived on was a small cul-de-sac, had 5 houses on it. Our neighborhood was great. It was very, very friendly, all the neighbors, all of us together. But imagine, if you can, one family being mine, like the family in my big fat Greek wedding, and Neil's family right next door being like my big fat Indian wedding. We always had lots of people, friends, cousins, extended families over. In a nutshell, we became friends. Good friends. Our families became friends. Our extended families became friends. We continue to share these friendships with our siblings, parents, Neil's parents when they were alive, and extended families and friends. As kids, while playing basketball in my driveway, we would often joke about opening up a business when we became adults and we could draw upon our respective Greek and Indian communities. Neil and I have been law partners for over 17 years, since 2001 when he left Mintz Levin. In the beginning, we had no staff, so we had to handle all the administrative tasks, including answering the phones, taking messages, balancing the checkbook, paying bills, and even taking out the trash sometimes. Our firm has grown over the last 17 years, and during this time, we have employed lawyers, paralegals, receptionists, office managers, marketing, and financing professionals. Throughout our growth, Neil and I have maintained a true partnership where we share equally in the expenses and revenues. We only get paid when all the bills on the employees have been paid. Our clients are primarily individuals and small business owners.
In other words, no institutions, no big companies. Our clients are a melting pot coming from different and diverse backgrounds. I stress the word our clients because there are no clients that are mine and no clients that are Neil's. All the clients belong to both of us. More often than not, I would end up representing most of our Indian clients, and Neil would end up representing our Greek clients. Our firm grew over the years because we were able to offer our clients representation in all aspects of the real estate process. Buyer and seller representations, bank representations, title work, purchase and sale agreements, new construction, permitting, zoning, evictions, property and contractual disputes, easements, personal injury, and even discrimination. Neil has wanted to be a judge since we first became partners. When we first discussed becoming partners, Neil disclosed this to me. He wanted to make sure that I knew he wanted to become a judge before we became partners. Neil Schering would be an excellent housing court judge. He has the right temperament, does not make quick or rash decisions, is fair-minded, compassionate, honest, has integrity, is passionate, and he is always prepared. I can think of no other person more qualified than Neil Schering to be a housing court judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Do councilors have any questions? Yes, Councilor Ryan.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Now, you and Mr. Sherry have been partners, what, 17 years?
Yes.
About 17 years. And what percent of your practice is in the housing court?
It's,
Because I know you have a varied practice, and you do a lot of different things.
yeah, a difficulty in answering that is that we're in Norfolk County, and I think until recently, there was no housing court in Norfolk County. So a lot of the summary process actions, landlord-tenant issues that we would have would end up in district court through the summary process procedure there. What percentage of our practice is landlord-tenant real estate related? I'd say 30-40%, sometimes as much as 50%. It varies every year because it's a small practice.
Now, let me ask this question. I don't do any landlord-tenant. I don't do any housing issues. Every case that you bring in the housing court, or that could be brought in the housing court, are all those cases also could be brought in the district court?
Not all of them, but the majority of them, yes.
Do you think we need I mean, there's a lot of district courts. And until recently, we haven't had many housing courts. Why do you think we need a housing court? I'm saying to myself, you're in Westwood, we got the Quincy District Court, we got the Devon District Court, you know, they've got a lot of courts around there. Why? I know we have it, but do you really think we got all these 5 new housing courts? But you're making it seem to me, and I'm no expert in this field, that at least a clear majority of these cases could be handled in the district court.
And a lot of them, I don't know what the percentages are in terms of summary process actions and how many are in district court, how many are housing court. But the housing court deals a lot with, it deals with housing issues. It deals with landlord-tenant issues, residential. So it's not commercial. It's really residential that it deals with, and it's dealing with people that could be displaced, people that have no money.
What I'm asking you, can the district court handle those issues? In a case that can, if some landlord wants to evict a tenant.
I'm a proponent that should be separated from the district court.
No, I understand that may be your position, but I'm asking you, if I'm a landlord, can I evict someone in the district court?
Yes.
Okay. So that case could, I mean, a judge is a judge. I mean, I get it.
However, where there is a housing court and a district court, the tenant can remove, you file the case in district court, and the tenant can remove it to the housing court.
Okay. And is that something that happens frequently?
It does.
And what does frequently mean to you? Like if you had 10 cases, 9 out of 10 or 3 out of 10?
I'd say probably 70%.
Okay. So is it fair to say
where you folks are in Westwood, you're educating me on the housing code, very informed. Where you folks are in Westwood, and you filed a lot of cases in the district court, but if the tenant wants to remove the case to the housing court, which is 70%, you probably haven't had that many cases, housing cases in the district court, just because of the fact that the tenant wants to ship it to the housing court.
No, but until recently, the housing court wasn't statewide.
I understand that.
So in Westwood, if, let's say you're in Dedham District Court, I don't think in Norfolk County, the tenant didn't have the option of removing it.
So he couldn't, because it's in Norfolk County, he couldn't remove it to the Boston housing?
No, couldn't.
Okay. Okay.
So he didn't have that option until recently, I think.
And how busy, you may not know this, but ballpark, you know a lot more about housing than I do. What percent of the business, until recently, the district court, whether it's Dedham or Quincy, which is near you, is related to housing issues?
Summary process?
No, but like you're talking like 50% of the court's business, 10%, 2%?
I have no idea.
Take a guess. I would take a guess and say less than 5%, but you know better than I do.
No, because I don't know all of the court's business, all the other stuff, the
Well,
district court.
times when you go to the court, you go to the district court,
There's
is it a
Summary
certain day?
process, yes, on Thursdays typically, in the
Is that
morning.
only day?
No, it's typically the day, but they'll hear cases on other days too, depending if it gets continued.
I'm getting a sense that until recently, where we didn't have all these different housing courts, if you lived in Boston, you could go to Boston housing, but if you lived in Norfolk County, you have to go to the district court.
Well, I'll give you an example. One time when I was in the Boston Housing Court, and this is before we became partners, I was there at the summary process session, and they had 370 cases on for trial that day.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. There's no question. I remember the days of Judge Daya, Judge King, Boston housing was whoa, it was genius.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm getting the impression you're making, the governor's making a lot of friends amongst the judges in the district court. Because all these cases that in Norfolk County that had to go to Quincy District Court, Dedham District Court, Rentham District Court, and so on. Now, you're going to alleviate a lot of pressure off these judges in the district court. They're going to have less work to do. Is that fair to say? Because you couldn't get taken away.
Absolutely, if it gets taken away, yes.
Okay. And your practice, what percent of your practice, say in the last 5 years, was devoted to representing landlords? And what percent was representing tenants?
I'd say it
I'm
was...
talking the firm, I don't mean...
Yeah. I'd say it mostly represented landlords.
Again, to me, that could be 51%, it could be 99%. What does mostly mean to you, sir?
I don't have the exact figures.
No, I understand, but, what do you think?
I'd say probably 80%. Yeah.
Representing landlords?
Yeah.
And again, the questions I'm asking you, I'm talking about your firm, because it's a small
Yes.
firm. How many, I'm just trying to get a sense of Mr. Sherring's experience. How many cases, we'll just go a couple of years back. In the last 3 years, how many cases went to trial? Because they go to trial in the housing court. How many cases?
Well,
some cases, like a personal injury that I do, settle out of court.
and a lot of the landlord-tenant cases settle out of court or at the courtroom steps.
Totally
The
understand.
housing court, it also has, it specializes in helping resolve cases. So they have a housing specialist, which the district court doesn't have, that sits down with the parties. It's almost like a mediation that occurs.
District court and the Superior Court, at least in personal injury, they have a lot of mediation
Yeah.
options.
So the housing court, there's a difference there
I do
between,
understand that.
yeah.
I do somewhat recall that. Well, let me ask this. In the last 3 years, representing landlords, have you had any trials that went from beginning to conclusion, where a judge had to make a decision? You might not have any, because I...
There's one or two that we had, and I can't specifically recall them, but I know they, and Mr. Schering, I think we might be able to elaborate better than I can on that. But I believe there was 2 trials. However, to put it into perspective, and I might be wrong on the statistic,
Sure.
but I think last year, the housing court, the whole housing court had 9 trials, if I'm correct. And all other matters were resolved without having to go to a full trial.
And what about 2 trials representing landlords and in the last year representing tenants?
I don't recall. I'd have to defer to Mr. Schering on that.
Okay. I don't have any further questions at this point.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have a couple of questions for you. Just following up on Councilor Raymond. So the way it was working in Norfolk County, housing court was in Quincy, I think, Thursdays, right? And the district court judge sat all day doing the housing court.
The summary process, yes.
Okay? So, again, so why we need housing court judges, why wouldn't we just put on 5 more district court judges, and since people are going to the Quincy court, have a judge assigned to the housing court session, and handle it that way?
I'm not the one that makes those decisions.
No, but do you think we need a housing court?
I think we do,
Why?
because I think you need, where you're dealing with people, where people live, them being displaced, and
Okay,
a
but-
host of other issues. I think,
Let me ask you this. Where's the housing court in Norfolk County?
I believe, actually, I believe it's in the, yeah, I'm not sure. Is it Bellingham? Oh, they haven't implemented the new ones yet, yeah. Okay.
There is no housing court.
There's no housing court itself. There's no building that says
No,
housing court.
no,
Everybody goes to a district court
Correct.
for housing issues, right?
right,
So, and we have district courts located all over the Commonwealth.
Yep.
78 or 79 of them, right?
correct.
So we're not going to build housing courts in, let's say, Norfolk County and Middlesex County and Plymouth County that say housing court, right?
That's right.
So if you got to go, let's say, to the Quincy court for your housing issues, and it's been done now for I don't know how many years, that a district court judge would handle that session. So why do you think we just can't keep doing that?
I don't
What's
know.
the difference?
I don't know. Same reason why we have probate court, superior court, appeals court.
Well, that's it. We don't have people, according to the laws of the Commonwealth, probate issues like divorce and dissolving a marriage, only people that are authorized to do that under law can do it, right?
Yep.
Okay. But the housing court is not such a thing. In the housing court, district court judges, for the most part, handle most of the housing court cases right now, don't they? Throughout the state?
I don't know. Probably, based on how you described it, but
How many housing court judges are there? 10?
I think there's 10.
Okay, so they're not handling. How many housing court, in Quincy on a Thursday, there's got to be 60, 70 people in that session. So if that's the way it is in each housing district court in the Commonwealth, there's thousands of them. So district court judges are handling the majority of what's coming in by tenants and landlords for relief. Okay?
Are you asking or telling me?
I'm asking.
Based on what you're saying, yes.
Okay. So we could get along with hiring more district court judges, since the buildings that people are going to are district court buildings, and just have a district court judge assigned to that session on certain days. Do you hear how Could we keep doing that?
Sure.
So why do we need housing judges?
I told you that I think the housing issues are specialized,
Yep.
and they should be handled by judges that specialize in that area.
But they're not, they're handled by district court judges most of the time now.
Okay?
And you've been before district court judges in the housing issues, right?
Yes, I have.
And they made rulings,
Yes, they have.
and they dissolved tenancies,
They do many things.
and they evict people. So they do everything that a housing judge does.
Not,
So aren't we just doing the new political thing?
yeah.
Where's he gonna sit? Where is this fellow gonna sit when he gets to be a judge? Where's he gonna go and sit? A building for him to sit, right?
You'll be at a courthouse.
District court?
Until they do otherwise, yes.
Okay, so why can't we have a district, why can't we make him a district court judge and have him handle housing issues? I don't get it.
I'm pausing and hesitating because you're asking me to
I am. because
to tell you something that I'm not empowered
you
to
are-
do.
Well, I'm not asking you to issue orders that we have to follow. I'm asking you because you have been in the housing court for 40 years. You know the housing court better than us.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing is district court judges are, you agree, are
So-
doing the majority of housing.
So you're advocating to dissolve the housing court totally? Is
I'm
that,
not advocating, I'm asking you your opinion as to whether we really need housing court judges, or do we need more district court judges to handle the housing issues?
I think we need more housing court judges to handle the housing court issues.
All right. And I don't know whether, have you been in court with the nominee? Have you seen him in court?
Yes, I have.
And how, in your opinion, does he do in court?
He's one of the best trial attorneys I've seen.
He has a lot of experience in the trial sessions.
Yes. Not only experience, but he's good at it.
He's good at it. Great. All right, anybody else, any questions?
I just wanted to ask you, did you indicate that you could not transfer a case to the Boston Housing Court?
I believe so, yeah.
All right.
Unless, my understanding is that if you're not in a jurisdiction, if you're not in an area where there's a housing court jurisdiction, then the tenant or the parties don't have the ability to transfer it from district court to housing.
All right. That was not my understanding. My understanding was that each of the districts, for example, we have a housing court in Kingman County, but they actually go up into Berkshire County and are available in the other counties as well. And cases can be heard up there.
Okay. It
So,
could be,
do you not
my
know?
understanding is that if you weren't in a housing court jurisdiction, you couldn't transfer.
All right. How many times have you seen Mr. Sherry in court in a trial?
3-4 times, maybe a little more than that.
3 or 4? Over how long a period of time?
That would be about, we've been partners for 17 years, but that'd probably be the last few, in the last 5-6 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor.
They're pretty thorough about questions, but I just wanted to ask you, when is the last time you saw Attorney Sherry in court?
It was recently, West Roxbury District Court, I'd say a few months, 2 months maybe. I forget exactly when the trial was.
And it was, what kind of a case?
That was a personal injury case.
Personal injury?
Yes.
Personal injury comes into the housing court? But
It could.
You're talking about you went to another court
No,
see?
we were in the West Roxbury District Court.
It was a district court and it was personal injury.
Yeah.
So it wasn't related to housing.
That one wasn't, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want to point out Representative McMurtry from Dedham, who joined us, along with Senator Rush from West Roxbury. Both of them do a fine job. Thank you. Where are we now? Who's next? Are you all done with you?
I'm ready.
Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else want to say anything on behalf of the nominee?
Yes.
Stand forward and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Amit Bhatt. I'm a good friend of Neil and I'd like to say something.
Yeah, tell us about it.
My father and I, we own a convenience store in Watertown. And in 2006, we had a fire and we met Neil. That's where Neil came in, helped us a lot where nobody else was helping us. And we had a...
How did he help you?
So, fighting the insurance companies, our insurance company, the landlord insurance company, we had a lawsuit from the landlord insurance company where Neil stepped in and fought those guys and helped us.
That's like fighting City Hall, fighting insurance companies, right?
He did an excellent job.
He did?
He had, we had a lawsuit from the landlord and we had a lawsuit from our insurance company. And he stepped in and had them pay. Our insurance company denied us, where Neil came in and made them pay for everything that we lost. We took a second mortgage on our house to rebuild. And then after 6 years later, I purchased the building. That's where Neil came in and helped me as a real estate lawyer purchase the building.
Wow.
Then, and last year, I purchased a house in Medford. That's where Neil came in, and his partner Lou came in and helped us buy a house.
So what if we confirm him, what are you going to do?
There's always Lou there.
So you want a convenience store in Watertown?
It's a wine shop, convenience store in Watertown,
We're about the street.
on School Street.
And what do you sell there? Do you sell like any marijuana?
No,
You don't have marijuana?
no, we don't. No, we don't.
Okay.
We sell.
Yeah, Councilor Devaney is from Watertown.
Yes,
He's very familiar
yes.
with that town.
Yeah, I was going to say, Counselor, I was going to ask what the name of it was in School Street?
Convenience Plus.
What is it?
Convenience Plus. It's right next to the Lexus dealers.
Okay, so how far up on School Street? Where is it?
It's in the middle of School Street.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, and how long have you been there?
I've been there 18 years.
Okay,
Um,
okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
This is going to be our 19th year coming, so
Okay.
So are you a voter in Watertown?
yes, I am.
That's good.
And,
That's good.
I look forward to see that sign up there.
Yes, Councilor Devaney.
It was good to see you again. I didn't recognize you earlier. How's the family?
Family's great.
Everybody doing well?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you for coming and testifying.
No problem.
Appreciate
I
it.
also want to state that Neil, we have opened up a temple in Medford and he has helped the Indian community a lot too. Just helping with general knowledge and help and people come and ask him for questions and everything. He's always pulls that time out and helps out the community.
How are his legal fees with that?
No, he's very generous. He's a generous guy.
I heard he's very good. Any questions? Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else here on behalf that wants to say anything? Okay, anybody here against? Anybody here against the nominee? Hearing none? We're going to let the nominee tell us and convince us why we should vote for you. You got 2 minutes, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Thank you to this honorable council. I'm privileged to be here before one of the oldest governing bodies in the country. And thank you, Councilor Jubenville, for hosting me and for your thoughtful guidance.
Thank you for your respect for this council. Some people don't have respect for it. Thank you.
I'm grateful to the entire council for this process, for considering my nomination, and for reviewing my application, and for listening to my witnesses. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for having the trust and confidence in me that if confirmed by this council, that I would administer justice fairly and with integrity in the housing court. I'd also like to take an opportunity to thank Chief Legal Counsel Lon Povich and also the JNC Executive Director Sharon Casey and her hard-working staff.
Get all of it. He does a heck of a job.
Emily and Olga. And also the many volunteers in the JNC as well as the Joint Bar. It's much appreciated.
All right, get all your thank yous done now.
Okay. All right. You have my resume, so I look forward to answering questions about it. But if confirmed by this council, I will provide a unique and balanced perspective to the housing court. I have a perspective of being born in Boston. I was raised by parents, as Lou said, who immigrated from poor rural villages in India with no electricity, no running water. And they came to Ellis Island in 1957. They were from different parts of India, one from the south, one from the north, and they met here in Boston. And I have that perspective of growing up in Boston in a one-bedroom apartment, a tenement in Jamaica Plain. I have the perspective of being woken up in the middle of a cold winter night by a Boston firefighter because the building was on fire. I have the perspective of standing outside in the cold with a blanket, seeing that building burn, spending weeks sleeping on a cot in a Red Cross facility, and then looking back, imagining how my parents got through that ordeal, getting their lives together and getting housing. And I focus on my parents because they served as an inspiration to me. My mom, during a very historic time in our country, before the Civil Rights Act, became a physician, and my dad a professor at Curry College for 40 years. As a lawyer, I have the perspective of being in public service as a Superior Court law clerk, as an assistant district attorney and an assistant attorney general. I have the perspective of working at a large law firm, Mintz-Levin. I have the perspective of working at a small law firm, which I consider to be a family-run business. I have the perspective of representing clients from many backgrounds, many walks of life. We truly are a multicultural law firm. And I have the experience of working on a variety of cases relating to housing and real estate law, which includes evictions, property disputes, and 93A claims and code violations. And I've been before town zoning boards and boards of appeals and the Architectural Access Board. I've represented plaintiffs in personal injury claims related to building code violations, and I have trial experience. I've tried over 30 cases to conclusion over the past 24 years of my career, including 2 recent district court trials in the last 12 months. I've also handled dispositive motions, such as summary judgments and motions to dismiss, and I'm familiar with requesting injunctive relief, which is also within the purview of the housing court. And I've appeared and worked on cases in the district court, the housing court, the superior court, the appeals court, the SJC, the federal district court, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and even in front of an immigration judge. So you may ask the question, why the housing court? Not just why do we have the housing court, but why the housing court for me? And I'd answer that by suggesting that the housing court has a very broad jurisdiction on housing-related matters. And as Lou indicated, our practice has a very broad base of housing-related matters. And that's a good segue for also the issue of the district court being the court of choice for many in Norfolk County. I didn't apply for any other judicial applications other than the housing court. I'd also like to point out that, like many in this room, I volunteer time to teach the MCLE. I've taken leadership roles in the Bar Associations, including serving as an advisory board member to the South Asian Bar Association, and also serving as a co-chair of the Mass Bar Association. And as Clerk Powers indicated, I take pride in giving back to my community, and as a business owner, I've given back to the community as well, employing many people. Should this honorable council confirm my nomination to the Housing Court, these collective perspectives and experiences will contribute to a balanced approach to understand the diverse range of pro se litigants that regularly appear before the court. Once again, thank you to this
Thank
council.
you very much for that, Councilor Devane. Any questions?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for all the time that you afforded me. I really enjoyed meeting you and finding out about the family and your profession. First of all, I'd like to start with the process. You went to the JNC. How many people? How many members were there?
There were 10 members at
There were 10
the
out of
interview.
21. They
At
were
the
there.
interview.
So 11 of them voted without even seeing you. So tell me, in coming to this process, anyone here in the State House prepare you for this hearing?
I met with Sharon Casey, as well as Chief Counsel Povich.
Did she give you the cases of the housing court that we had?
No.
Did she tell you, the questions that we asked?
She emphasized the importance of being prepared before this council, as the council is well aware of the issues and will ask, and should ask, very difficult questions.
So you weren't given the questions?
I was given an overview of...
You were given the questions, because we have someone writing the questions right down from the JNC now. And they come to the hearing and they write down our questions and give it to the nominee. So I just wanted to see if you followed up on that. So, which is not the Governor's Council, preview. That's something different, because I meet with you. I meet with everyone.
Thank you.
I have a real concern that I have found out that in my research that even though they're going to expand the housing court, they're still going to continue to have housing come before the district court. Makes no sense to me, because I favor the specialty courts, that we have drug courts, veterans courts, but I don't understand if they're going to expand the housing court, why you go to the district court. So, I think it was brought up by Councilor Jubenville, the necessity of a housing court is kind of, you're going to two courts. How do you balance that? How do you figure that out?
A perspective that I may offer, Counselor, that might help is, in the district court, you have a judge sitting there dealing with criminal arraignments. You have individual defendants that are being held on bail. They're being held prior to a bail hearing. That's an important issue, because someone's liberty and freedom is being infringed upon. And if a judge is in the summary process session, which they are, and they've handled it, it takes that judge away, because as was indicated, these sessions have high volumes of litigants, just like the supplementary process session, high volume of litigants. So the housing court would relieve the district court judge of that Thursday session, particularly when they have trials, to address some of the liberty issues and some of the criminal issues that the district court has to deal with in high volume on a regular basis. In addition, the housing court has resources that the district court does not. They have housing specialists, they have tenant protection programs, and other available resources for the litigants.
But the reality is that no matter whether they're prosecutors or whatever, former prosecutors, the judges in the district court are making decisions on housing matters.
That's correct.
That's right. So it is what it is. So, I just don't understand why it goes to two courts, but it is what it is. I am very concerned about foreclosures. And I have a friend, it was a family home that was passed down from grandmother to mother to her, and she lost it. It was foreclosed. Tell me what experience you've had in foreclosures.
Foreclosures is a concern for many in the Commonwealth. The experience that I've had with foreclosures is representing both lenders in making sure that they adhere to the statutory requirements, because a foreclosure is it's a phenomenal thing. It's when you're taking something, you're taking a home from
How many
somebody.
cases have you had?
With foreclosure, I've had one foreclosure
One
case.
foreclosure in 23, how long you been 23?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the foreclosure issues that I deal with.
Well, I think it's important now because, you know, we see that, what, there's 400 a year. And in 11 years, looking back 11 years, the 3 most egregious years surpassed the foreclosures of the Great Depression. That concerns me. You know, when people are taking out of their house, it just, you know, their home, that's all we have. I'm concerned that you only had one case. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you know what standing is?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us what standing is?
Standing is the right to sue. You have to have standing to come into court as a plaintiff.
Okay, who has to show standing?
Plaintiff.
Okay, good. So you got these questions already, didn't you?
Not with respect to...
Well, I asked these questions before, so if you met with someone, they gave you the questions.
I am...
Just knows the answers.
So anyway, we don't interrupt. We don't interrupt people. That's not, we don't do that. Okay? Who is cheering anyway? So anyway, it's... I was distracted by someone speaking out. Okay, what if a plaintiff fails to show standing? What's the result?
If the plaintiff fails to show standing, the court ought to dismiss the case.
Okay. Okay, do you know what a title theory state is? Do you know what that is?
I'm familiar with the term.
Is Massachusetts a title theory state?
Yes, to the extent that my understanding of a title theory state is that in order to perfect your title to real estate, you have to record the deed at the registry of deeds.
Were you prepped on this?
No, the practice that we have is we have a transactional side of the real estate, so we routinely record deeds.
Okay, tell me what an assignment of mortgage is. Explain that to us.
Sure. An assignment of mortgage is when an individual goes to a lender and gets a conventional mortgage. And after closing on that transaction, or perhaps even before closing, that lender assigns, or another way of putting it, sells that mortgage to another entity, often another lender. The lender that initially underwrote the transaction makes a profit on that, and the recipient of that assignment, or the assignee lender, now takes over the mortgage and the note.
Okay, having said that, must there be a complete chain of assignment of mortgage ending with the foreclosing party? How does that work?
I believe that's the issue that the SJC addressed in Ibanez, that if, put simply, if you're going to do an assignment and you don't record that assignment properly at the Registry of Deeds and you don't own it, then you can't foreclose. You don't have ownership of that mortgage. And that's my understanding.
Okay, before the start of a foreclosure, must every assignment be recorded in the Registry of Deeds?
It's advisable. It's advisable as counsel to a lender, yes.
Well, it's essential, according to Mass General Law.
Yes.
It's essential. It's not an option. Okay, I'm learning about housing court, and I've done a lot of investigation. What's a mortgage note?
A mortgage note, or the note, is the instrument that evidences the promise to pay.
Does it have a specified rate, length of time, or anything?
Correct. Yeah, it has a term. Okay. It has an interest rate.
Okay. All right, let me see. Given that a mortgage note is a promissory note, Does the ownership transfer from one party to another?
Counselor, if I may ask, the ownership of the note?
Like an unsecured note?
It can be assigned.
Okay, the answer I was looking for is no. Okay, no, because a note without a securitized asset transfer endorsement, it can't be, because the note must be for value and with intent. I can give that to you. You know, I understand you can't know everything about all the housing laws, but it's important for me to ask them.
Thank you.
Okay. Can ownership of a promissory note be transferred by means of assignment of mortgage?
It has been done. So my understanding is, yes, you can assign a note and a mortgage, but if it's not done in accordance with the laws, as the counselor has pointed out, then it would be void.
This is legal. It's a no, because mortgages and notes are subject to different legal means of transfer of ownership. So that's a no. What can the next party, where can the next party endorse that note? What is the procedure?
The assignee,
Following up, the next party, how do they endorse the note?
if I understand the counselor's question, if the assignee of the note is endorsing, typically there's an attachment to the note that outlines that.
Okay. What is allonge? A-L-L-O-N-G-E. What does that mean to you?
It's an amendment. It's an amendment to the note.
How is it used?
It's typically used to, if there's an assignment, it might be evidenced in the allonge. If there's a change in the terms, or if there's special terms in the note that the borrower and the lender have agreed to, it might be...
So where do they put this allonge? Where is it?
At the end of the note.
Okay. So what if it's not attached?
If it's not attached, then it raises an issue of whether or not it's enforceable.
Okay. This is hypothetical, but what if a promissory note is lost or destroyed? Is there anything a plaintiff can do to reestablish the debt?
If a document's destroyed, the original document destroyed under the best evidence rule, the original is the best evidence for the court. However, if the party that's seeking to utilize that document or introduce that document into evidence does not have the original, then that party, whether it's the plaintiff or the defendant, can demonstrate to the court that there was an original, the original was destroyed or lost or stolen, and the copy, if there's a copy, is presented to the court. If there's no copy, then it's by affidavit.
Okay. Tell me what an affidavit is.
It's a sworn statement under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. If you are chosen as a housing court judge and you're presented with a document entitled affidavit, where this document concerned the ownership of a promissory note that was not in evidence, what would you do? Would you admit this document into evidence? What would you do?
Well, it's a good question. If the affidavit is seeking to introduce evidence that the document was lost and stolen, I would consider that as admissible. If the affidavit is seeking to establish the terms of that lost and stolen document, no, I don't believe that that would meet the evidentiary standard.
Well, it's not enough to say you have personal information about the affidavit, so it would be a no if that was what it was based on, someone's personal knowledge, you know?
If it was personal knowledge of the terms and conditions of the document and the affiant was seeking to introduce that into evidence, it would be inadmissible.
Okay. I learned something about RMBS. Do you know anything about that? A residential mortgage-backed security trust. This is all new to me, so so I'm asking you.
Thank
As
you.
a nominee, tell me about it.
My understanding of that, and those mortgage-backed security trusts came into the landscape, if you will, when Wall Street and other investors viewed mortgages as a viable securities instrument that could be traded. And so they would be packaged in these mortgage-backed securities and then traded like other securities and invested in and part of the investment landscape.
Okay. Also, there's another term, mortgage electronic registration systems. Have you been involved in that at all?
MERS is very common because that's part of how you can record these mortgage-backed securities is through this mortgage electronic registration system.
Okay, do the membership rules of that mortgage electronic registration system allow it to own legal title to real property?
I would, in my view, I don't think so.
That's good.
I don't think
I like
it
that
can.
answer. Okay, so since Massachusetts, a mortgage is legal title to property, can an entity that cannot own title to property own a mortgage in foreclosure?
I'm sorry, Counselor, would you mind repeating the question, please?
A mortgage is a legal title to property. Can an entity that cannot own title to a property own a mortgage in foreclosure?
I would first clarify that my understanding is that the mortgage is not title to the property, but rather it's notice to the world, if it's recorded in Massachusetts, which it's typically done, that the mortgagee, or the holder of that note, has a collateral in the property, or if the property goes to be sold, that mortgagor has to be paid. However, if I understand Councilor Devaney's question, is if that mortgage holder doesn't have title to the mortgage, then it could be deemed defective.
You know, I do have a concern because, you know, in 18 years I look for someone who's had just that focus, legal focus, whether it's juvenile court. I don't want anyone that goes to other courts. I just want someone who's too sensitive. And housing is very specific, like Leon Court. It's very specific. So you're going to you are still doing other cases that are not housing related. You just recently went to court that was not housing related. Now, you know, you were asked to tell us your most recent cases in court. Now, how many cases have you had in your career in housing?
In housing, as Attorney Daquiana said, I've had 3 appearances. However, because we're in Norfolk, because we're in Norfolk County, most of our cases dealing with housing issues have been filed in the district court.
Well, you know, when I look at your resume, I'm looking for strictly housing. I appreciate you've been with people who, you know, you represent them, and it's very wonderful that you've done that, manslaughter, unemployment, and so forth. But it says recent, and yet they're 7 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, they're not recent, and they're not related to housing. I mean, one of them is unemployment. Another one is about an election of your temple, manslaughter, all of these things. I mean, I'm looking for housing because I'm voting for someone that has housing experience. And you said you made 3 appearances in housing, right?
I would point out, Councilor Devaney, that I believe, and if you could just direct me as to what section of my
Okay, well, I'm looking
application.
at your questions 23, lists the 5 most significant trials, appeals, transactions, or other legal matters in which you have been involved in your career, and provide all the following, names, addresses, defense attorney, counsel, all of that. And what I'm saying is that they're not all related. One is a manslaughter, and unemployment, and the thing is that the dates are 1998, 1999. I'm looking for someone that's in court every day or almost every day in recent, and that's your most recent, 1999. And, OUIs, you've had those under 24. I think, you've done good work, but then when you ask, and you've had fraud and other things, but when you're asked, what is the most meaningful case that you've had, it was dealing with the Temple's election, that they were accused of election fraud. How does that relate to me voting for a housing nominee? And that was the most significant case that you had, that you put here, And so I just don't understand it. In 1995, all these OUI and fraud in 2008, 1995, 2006. How do you explain this, that you haven't gone to court? And it was said by your witness that they just recently saw you, and what was the case that you were taking?
That was a personal injury.
Yeah, a land court thing or something, I don't know. But, this is an important position. And, also in drugs, I like to hear what you've been involved with drugs and paternity cases and everything. But if I were a nominee going for housing court, it would all be housing court, because all of your legal work is very commendable. But we're talking about housing court. Tell me about how drugs has been involved in your practice.
Specifically,
well, I don't know.
Councilor Devaney.
Have you had someone you're representing, having an eviction or a foreclosure, something? I don't know.
Sure. If I may, before answering that, Councilor Devaney, if I could just respond by clarifying that with respect to question 23, the most recent housing court case was January through July of 2017.
2017.
Correct. That was in the Northeast Housing Court in front of Judge Winnick, and that was a landlord-tenant eviction where we utilized the housing specialist as well as the tenant protection program. And then prior to that one was another housing court case as part of my 5 significant cases, which was in May of 2011, and that was in the Boston Housing Court. Specifically to the councilor's question about cases involving drugs, we've not, the most recent case that I've had dealing with remotely with drugs was an operating under the influence of drug case.
Well, it's commendable. You represented about cosmetic surgery and auto insurance and elections and all of that, but, and I like you, and really, child support, paternity, I've been here a long time, and I just don't see a real strength in housing court. Do you think that 3 appearances in all your years is sufficient to be a housing court judge?
Yes, and if I may explain why, Counselor,
I understand the district court, so we don't have to go into that again. I understand that.
And that number is significantly
And they're
higher.
going to keep on. And that's what really, I looked into that, and I said, gee, if they're going to have an expansion of the housing court, maybe they're going to stop the district court judges having the housing cases before them. But not true. It's still going to continue. So what's the point of the expansion? Can you answer that one?
And as I indicated, and as was raised earlier, the housing court provides more resources. It allows the district court judges that are dealing with issues of custody individuals that are being held, perhaps being held without bail, that need to be heard. It allows those judges to address those issues, and at the same time, the litigants in the housing court can avail themselves to the many resources that are available that are not in the district court.
Now, the percent, when you put the percent of each court that you've been to, what's it, 5% housing?
Yes.
5%?
Yes. And again, if I may clarify that, of my district court practice, 65% of those are landlord-tenant cases. They're
I'm just going to stop the hearing. Lieutenant Governor.
Is she coming in now? Okay, I'll continue after. Thank you, Counselor.
And then we're going to go to lunch.
I'll continue my questioning here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back at 1:30.
Sounds good.
So you're free to stay or you can leave or whatever.
I'll have to go to the streets. I didn't know that. Oh my God, small world. Just wanted to. Yeah.
Not trucking. I'll make it a little longer next time.
Okay.
We're going to call our assembly to order, and I recognize Councilor Kennedy for our prayer pledge today.
A moment of silence for all of our first responders who do such a fantastic job every day with themselves out on the line. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get on with the regular meeting, I would just like to acknowledge the fact that a person from my district won the voice. Her name is Bryn Cartelli, and I think that the governor should come on out and we'll have her sing for him.
Acting governor for the day, I think that's great. All right, we will follow up on that important matter. Councilor Hurley, why don't you think about making a motion now to record advice and consent for financial one?
So moved.
All in favor, say
Aye.
Councilor Casey for a motion to record advice and consent of the pending list of notaries, public and justices of the peace.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I recognize Councilor Ionella for a motion to record advice and consent to the appointment of Eric T. Donovan to the position of clerk magistrate of Boston Municipal Court.
Thank you, so moved. Outstanding appointment.
Second.
Second.
We may commence the roll call. Oh, before we do that, Councilor Juberdell, then Councilor Vanning.
Very briefly, superb nomination, superb.
I just have to say excellent. We should have more like this.
Anyone else? Okay, we can commence the roll call.
Councilor Ioannoni.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Casey.
Yes.
Councilor Hurley.
Yes.
Councilor Junior.
Yes.
Councilor Devaney.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Councilor Jubenville for a motion to record advice and consent to the appointment of Joseph L. Michaud to the position of Associate Justice of the Housing Court.
So moved, Lieutenant Governor.
Is there a second? Second. Councilor Devaney.
I just wanted to comment that, I'm not looking for a perfect nominee, but honesty is the most important quality in anyone, especially a judge. And there were a couple of questions that I asked, and he was so honest that he did not know, those particular the questions that I was asking to answer. So I just wanted to put that in the record that I was impressed with that. And That's all I wanted to say, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We need to get a roll call.
Councilor Duff.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Casey.
Yes.
Councilor Hurley.
Yes.
Councilor Jubilo.
No.
Councilor Devane.
Yes.
Councilor Iannelli.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so we will now have Councilor Iannella for a motion for advice and consent for the appointment of Kathleen E. Whalen to the position of Public Administrator
So
for
moved.
Norfolk County.
Second.
Okay. There's no roll call necessary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Omar Hernandez is looking for reappointment to the Industrial Accident Board. He is someone familiar to all of us, and it would be for a term expiring December 29, 2023. Councilor Devane.
Lieutenant Governor, the first opening is June 6th, so I will have the hearing at 11 o'clock on June 6th. And I also have something I want to bring up, Lieutenant Governor, and I will read my statement and I will give it to you. And it's to the governor, and to the Lieutenant Governor. I have been outraged by the rulings which Judge Feely has made, not only recently but in the past. The latest case was giving probation to a heroin drug dealer. Judge Feely said he was providing for his family. Judge Feely didn't want to put this drug dealer in prison because he would get deported. I have had 2 close friends who lost sons from heroin overdoses. But this judge thinks it's okay to sell drugs. Just 2 examples of this judge's egregious rulings. He released a previous criminal who then killed a police officer. Another was guilty of multiple rapes of a 12-year-old girl. In accordance with Massachusetts Constitution, Chapter 3, the governor, with consent of the council, may remove this judge upon the address of both houses of the legislature. I am submitting this constitutional process so that the governor will be prepared if the legislature votes a bill of address. Respectfully submitted, Marilyn Petito Devaney. And this is the process of removing judges. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Madam President.
Councilor Jubilo and then Councilor Kennedy.
Well, let me just correct the record. I think was misstated that Judge Feely endorses selling illegal drugs. I don't believe he ever made that statement or he ever ruled on that issue. And what gets me is, not only here but in the press, people criticize judges and they weren't even in the room when the judge made the decision, heard what he or she heard, had access to criminal records, had access to probation, had access to witnesses, and made a decision based on what he or she had. We may disagree with that decision, but we shouldn't criticize it because every judge that makes a decision, every clerk that makes a decision, every governor's counselor that makes a decision on a nominee, we're one step away from a tragedy if that nominee or that judge or that clerk releases somebody or the parole board releases somebody and they commit a crime. That is unfair and nobody rules with a crystal ball. So I'm gonna say that Judge Feely, in my view, having been before him numerous times, is very cautious, very thinking. It takes every bit of evidence and does a good job in making a decision, and some I've agreed with it, some I haven't. But he does the best he can with what he thinks is proper. No judge in this Commonwealth is going to release somebody knowing they're going to commit a crime or hurt somebody. No judge is going to do that at all. So I don't think it's fair to criticize somebody when you weren't in the room and you didn't know what was said or done.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kennedy.
Councilor Jubilo and I very rarely agree, but in this one, he's dead on. Judge Feely's getting a raw deal from the press. He's getting a raw deal all around. We cannot second guess the decisions that judges are making in court. To do so would impinge upon the independence of the judiciary. We make appointments, lifetime appointments of judges, because we want them to make tough decisions. And he's made some tough decisions. I've appeared in front of him many times as well, and frankly, every time I walk in the courtroom as a defense lawyer, I see him on the bench, I'm a little concerned because his reputation and indeed his actions is just the opposite of what's being presented in the press. He's a lawyer, not a judge. He's a tough guy. He's somebody who gives some very tough sentences, holds people on high bails a lot, and he's usually not the guy I want to be in front of because of that. He has a reputation of being somewhat pro-government in all of his rulings. What's being presented in the press is dead wrong in terms of the person who's in that courtroom, and you know, the taint on his reputation is just outrageous. He happens to be a very good judge, he happens to be a very thoughtful judge, and he also happens to be a very tough judge. And that's from somebody who's appeared in front of him a lot.
Lieutenant Governor?
Hold this, Councilor Casey, and then Councilor Grant.
Lieutenant Governor, this boils down to judicial accountability, which is something that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts does not have. There is no meaningful review of our lifetime appointed judges. They're appointed for life and they are never reviewed again. The review consists of a private process that is not made known to the public, and when we have instances where I just went to a ceremony for Officer Tarantino, who was shot in the back after a routine traffic stop in Auburn by a career criminal who walked out of court on personal recognizance one afternoon and went on to kill that young officer, and seeing his family at that ceremony and reading the inappropriate comments, might be talking about a very good judge, but what I read in the paper, if it was accurate, that he said that he let this person out who pled guilty to possession of heroin and intent to distribute heroin because he was selling it to support his family, I have a big problem with that. And whether he had good reason to do what he did, his comments were most inappropriate. And then you talk about the reduction of bail. What we need to do in this Commonwealth, and I've been asking for this for years, and now we have some senators on board who want to sponsor legislation to require some type of meaningful judicial review where judges have to come back before this council, and it will take a constitutional amendment, but it has to happen to require them to be reaffirmed as judges, whether it's 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is. We don't have any meaningful review of our judges. There is no judicial accountability, and that's the problem, and that's where we come back to after we read after every tragedy. Officer Gannon, Officer Tarantino, this heroin dealer who's let out after pleading guilty, who knows what he put out on the streets. You know, this happens in every court. That's why we need mandatory minimums on drug sentencing and career criminals. But we need meaningful judicial accountability. And I hope my colleagues would support that initiative, work with the legislature. I've started doing it, and we don't want to elect our judges, but it's high time we have some accountability. We've been speaking to the chiefs of police in this Commonwealth. Enough is enough. They have to be brought back to answer for their decisions. And they can explain. This gives them a forum to explain their decisions, where they can't do so in the media.
I simply was bringing the process to the attention of the governor so that he would be ready to bring it to us. I have been lobbying for a term for the judges rather than a lifetime, because sometimes a robe changes people. Obviously, this happened. And it might be, I talked to the head of the judicial courts, and it was within the law to give probation. It might be right, but it's wrong. It might be legal, but it's wrong. And the other thing I want the legislature to change the sentencing guidelines so this doesn't happen again. But I think there's three things. I mean, this is going to have a bill of address through the House and Senate, go to the governor, and it goes to us. But I just want the governor to be aware, to follow this so that we can do it expediently. We have wonderful judges that would never, ever, take this route to have a drug dealer be on probation and to say he provided for his family. I mean, how many people have died because of this drug dealer? I've had two friends that, and just recently, a month ago, my friend Kate from Westboro and my friend from Watertown, Francis, that they found their sons dead of overdose. And it's despicable. And he was concerned, Judge Feely was concerned if he gave him prison time, he would be deported. Can you believe it? So I'm just saying that that is improper. It is improper. It might be legal, but it's improper. And I just think we do have a process, and I gave you how it is, the removal of judges, and I will give it to everyone here in this room. And there is a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but I just want to give heads up to the governor. I have talked with Representative Lyons. This is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue, and we have to work together to get this through the House and Senate so it can go to the governor and go to us ultimately that we take the vote. As I said, we have wonderful judges, and I'm so proud of the ones that I have voted for. So I don't want this to be anything said badly about our judges, but I think we should have terms. I really do. And we can't do that. We can't do that here. And I've been talking about that since I first got elected. So I didn't want to belabor this, but why there was a discussion, all I did was bring the information to you and the governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman
Duff. Thank you, Governor. I appreciate your passion, Governor, today. Would you like to let us know how you voted on this judge since you were sitting on the council?
I'm sorry, what?
How did you vote on him since you were sitting on the council? Would you clarify?
You know what? You don't have a crystal ball. This man, had a history of getting the bad guys. His whole legal life, he has been a criminal prosecutor. So he has just flipped. So no one had a crystal ball because he presented himself in a different manner. So you don't have a crystal ball, we don't. That's why we need terms. That's why we need terms so that we can.
So I just in response, that was a yes or no question, like you've been asking the people who've been sitting here for the last few weeks. But the point being is that they don't have crystal balls, and maybe the judge made a mistake, just like the person.
But how many mistakes are going to
Councilor DeVay, all we did was ask you to vote for
everyone's had a
him.
chance to speak except who's wanted to speak. Councilor Hurley.
Thank you.
And Councilor Hurley, you'll have the last word on this matter.
I would just say that if you want to talk about a bad judge, let's talk about Thomas Estes. He is a disgrace.
Amen.
And I am somewhat disappointed that the Supreme Judicial Court has not acted quicker in his case. His actions were inexcusable, they were absolutely immoral, unethical, and he should not be collecting a paycheck. That's what I have a problem with. A judge who clearly violated every boundary of appropriate conduct as a judge. And I would ask the Lord above to inspire the SJC to move it, because this guy doesn't deserve another dime. And I was a judge for 20 years. This is not the way judges act, but this guy he should have resigned in disgrace. And he's just sitting there collecting a paycheck.
Thank you.
And I do think that we have to do something to speed up the process for removal of judges. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, I forgot to say, I heard the tape on the radio of Judge Feely, what he said to the drug dealer. So this isn't hearsay. There was a tape of it. So I do want to say that. And I called the head of the courts because I wanted to have him put out on paid administrative leave until we got through this process. But I was told he acted within the law, so I couldn't do that. So I think we have a process. There's a bill of address that Representative Lyons has filed, and we should all support it, Republicans, Democrats. It's not a party issue. This is fairness. This is a travesty of justice, and I thank you people for supporting this.
Okay, I guess the final word from that being Councilor Junior.
Just one second. We all forget our history. We have one of the finest judicial systems in the United States. It is used from a model and has been used from a model with other states when they were forming their judiciary. And the reason I suggest ours works so well is because John Adams had the idea that judges sit for life, like the federal judges. And that is because he knew that there would be just discussions like this when a judge made a correct but unpopular decision, or when the press took and ran with. And he wanted judges to sit without fear of losing their position if they made a decision that the press ran away with and criticized. Once you take that away, judges are going to be afraid to make any decision, and we're going to have a terrible judiciary. So let's stick with our system that's worked, that John Adams set up for us, because it's worked well.
That concludes our business today, and I thank you for the civil discussion that you all brought to this important topic.
Did I set the time for?
Yes, you did. It is
11 o'clock.
June 6th.
At 11 o'clock. Mine is a terrible thing to waste.
1:30.
How are you? Good.
1:30.
I'm sure I went there.
Yes. She's not.
I didn't sign one.
When I have you and your guest committee go take a lunch break or something, you come back at 1:30, you can do that. Just gonna stay for a while.
I took the train. I don't know.